And joining me now is Rhode Island Democratic Congressman Gabe Amo. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us here on Meet the Press Now. Gabe,
thanks for having me, Gabe.
It's a good name.
It's a great name.
So let's start with the special counsel report. You used to work in the Biden administration and the Obama administration. What'd you make of it?
Well, look, it's clear that the president was cleared of wrongdoing, and the headline here should be just that. Ultimately, we need to focus on the fact that the choice between President Biden and former President Trump, who has himself mired in a series of investigations, is very clear. There's nothing similar between those circumstances, and now we need to move forward to making that choice clear in this election.
Some of the president's allies, including the vice president, has called this report politically motivated. Do you agree?
I agree. I mean, it's very clear that there are vendettas made by the Republicans that they want to satisfy with this report that ultimately cleared the president. That's the most important headline here. And it is very clear that the contrast with former President Trump could not be more stark. He is mired in investigations, and those are really unsettled for the American people.
And we've heard those comments from your congressional colleagues. You know, it seems like talking points have been given out among some of the Democratic colleagues, but what evidence is there that this was politically motivated?
Well, look, the facts are clear. What is most important about the findings? The most important thing about the findings is that the president has been cleared. So we should move on to what the voters need to decide this November between former President Trump and President Biden, who has led us into a historic economic recovery and had produced real results for the American people, putting people over politics.
Now, speaking of the voters, you know, in his report, Robert Hur did make the distinction between President Biden's case and former President Trump. As you said, he's facing many criminal counts, 40 criminal counts when it comes to this case, and he allegedly actually hid the classified documents and did not alert authorities, which the special counsel credits Mr. Biden for doing. But when it comes to voters, are they going to be able to separate that? Is it difficult to make the argument that former President Trump, you know, should go to jail for mishandling classified documents? And I understand the distinction that you made, but will voters see it differently?
I think voters will see it clearly because the president was a full, active, forthright participant in the investigation here, did not hide, has not tried to obstruct, and wants to move past this so we can focus on delivering results for people instead of dealing with all of the charges that former President Trump is dealing with at this moment.
Do you think the transcripts from President Biden's interviews should be released?
You know, I defer to the appropriate folks there. Frankly, what I do think the American people care about is that this process was done in a transparent fashion. It appears so, and now we can move on.
Congressman, the fact remains that the president has been in the Senate, or has been in politics a really long time. He was a senator for 15 years before you were born. And so age really has become an issue in this campaign. You know, one of those recent polls showed most Americans do believe that both President Biden and former President Trump are too old. How do you think the Biden-Harris campaign gets over that in the next coming months?
Well, I think they focus on the experience that the president brings and what that experience has yielded, which has been historic job growth and recovery, an American Rescue Plan, a bipartisan infrastructure law, Inflation Reduction Act. You know the hit list. No one has done more in this period of time than President Biden. And that's a focus on people over politics, on ensuring that when he connects with the American people to solve their problems, he's very focused on them and not the aspirations of former President Trump, who wants to break every international relationship that we have via his comments regarding NATO. You
know, Congressman, we just heard during my colleague Monica Alba's report that the president today, in his speech, made light of, you know, his memory. He tried to, you know, deal with it with humor. Do you think that approach is going to work?
I think all approaches that make the president very clear that he wants to serve the American people are what we need to focus on. When I worked for President Biden in that Oval Office, when you go to brief the president, you better come prepared, because he was very focused on how are we working together to solve problems for people. When I traveled with the president after natural disasters, whether it's Fort Myers Beach or Surfside, I saw him really display the empathy that we require out of our leaders and actually work to help
Should he be doing more robust events?
I think he's going to do a whole range of events. I think you've got to meet people where they are. You saw last night they're on TikTok now, the Biden
Which, by the
campaign.
way, they said they weren't going to be a part of.
Yeah.
So is that an acknowledgement that they're not doing well with younger voters?
Well, I think it's a campaign tool. Look, I'm 36 years old. I know a lot of my peers are on TikTok. Go meet people where they are. You see the president having dinner in the home of some voters. That's important. And he will be in front of podiums, in front of crowds. He will do it all because that's what it requires. He has the capacity and the ability to connect with people more than most politicians I've ever seen. And I look forward to seeing more of it along the campaign trail.
You know, the media has talked a lot in the last couple of days whether he should have done a Super Bowl interview. What do you think?
You know, I watched the Super Bowl, but I was really focused on that halftime show with Usher. So
it's a big audience. You want to talk about a robust event, that would have been it.
Well, I think that there are so many ways to get to people. And as you know, there's a decentralized way to watch the Super Bowl now. There's no guarantee of finding people in any particular venue. I know that the campaign and the president are doing all that they can to get in front of voters. And I have confidence that once people spend more time with the president and reviewing their choices, they're going to pick him again this November.
Congressman, I want to talk about your day job now and this national security supplemental that has had so many problems in the last couple of weeks and months. Where does this go from here?
Well, I am optimistic, and I'm optimistic because Democrats in Congress have really led the way. I am glad that in the other chamber, we have the Senate hopefully moving forward this week. We'll see what comes out of their amendment process, and then I hope that in the House that there's political will out of Republicans to serve our national security interests.
So do you think the supplemental should be separated from the border deal?
Well, I think whatever we need to do to satisfy our obligations, both domestically and abroad, is the path forward. So if they have to break it up.
The border, yeah. It sounds at this point, looking at it, and we've heard from the House Speaker repeatedly, it appears dead. So at this point, do you want to move on to, funding for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan?
Well, we know right now that those priorities, Israel, Ukraine in particular, a fight for democracy, which is so essential to what our standing is in the world, and of course what's happening with Taiwan and the South China Sea are very important. So we need to move forward where we can and then return to a more robust conversation on the border.
And Hakeem Jeffries has said that he would use every available legislative tool for the House floor if it passes through the Senate. So is there talk of a discharge position if Speaker Johnson won't take it up?
Well, as a good junior member of the caucus, I am looking forward to learning what vehicles we have available. You know as well as I do, there are a couple different opportunities, but I think it's important that Democrats act in unison, show and demonstrate to the American people that we want to put people over politics and get things done, as opposed to be mired in what we see out of the House Republican leadership, which is to do nothing. And that isn't meeting the moment, isn't servicing the needs of the American people, and isn't keeping our world safe.
Congressman Gabe Amo, thank you so much for joining us here on Meet the Press Now. It's really good to talk to you.
Thank you, Gabe.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.